as Heather said, I'm Carol, and I work out of the Orem office full time, and then a few other things there. And with this company, of course, you know, we have lots and lots of hundreds of thousands of companies, and so we hit some of those companies, and we're kind of all, I have quite a few little jobs that we do inside the company, but I do a lot of the education, and I run the anxiety program. So part one was 5 weeks to better anxiety. So it was kind of like, here's what is expected in the anxiety program that I run that's 5 weeks long. And those are Mondays at 5:30. So if you ever want to enter the whole program there, it's great because I go through each week. It's about an hour and a half, and it's on Zoom, and it's always Mondays at 5:30. So you can also register for that. If you're new to this, when you go to the workshops on our website at blomquisthill.com, and you hit workshops, and there is where you sign up for any of these things that are free with your company. And the next one is the maintaining part. So we're going to maintain some of the anxiety tools, mindfulness, how to maintain your anxiety and stick with your habit. I guess a lot more tools, right? Those thinking errors, right? For example, you can watch that one that's separate, and that's week 4 in the thinking errors webinar. By the way, you can watch that on our YouTube channel. Thinking errors part 1, part 2. But in the anxiety program, that is part, well, not part, week 4. So if, for example, if you're going to maintain some CBT, which is cognitive behavioral therapy, which has a lot to do with thinking errors and thinking error stories, then how do you expose yourself? Let's see, make sure that I'm connected good. And making sure that everything is in your cognitive first, because that's where we start. And I'm going to go over that a little bit, and then going into your feelings, and then going into your behavior. So we want to maintain the behavior. Okay. So we're going to do exposure. So CBT, cognitive behavioral, we're going to talk about exposure a lot. And then I just touch on EMDR because prolonged exposure and EMDR are very much similar in, not similar modalities, but similar in providing complete healing with the anxiety disorders. It is the two things that we use the most statistically. So all anxieties and phobias are influenced by your beliefs about a given situation. So we have belief systems that is huge, because we all have these belief systems that stem from all the way back. And then we have something happens and it reinforces it, or someone says something to us that reinforces our belief system. And then we have this situation, which then we use our judgment to go into action. And if it's a negative belief system about something, we're going to look at it as dangerous instead of discomfort. So dangerous is very, very different than discomfort. We're going to be discomfort. We're going to have discomfort throughout our whole lives. And we would be dead if we didn't have anxiety, if we didn't have that fight, flight, or freeze in our brain. It keeps us alive. So, but it's discomfort. There's some discomfort with it, but a lot of times it's not dangerous. Okay. So this is just a slide for fun. It's not for you to look at. And now if you can't see my slides, sorry, you're going to have to review these later when you get the PowerPoint and watch the video. But because sometimes I know people aren't looking at the slides, and I think that you are. And so, so it's like, okay, this is complicated. This is why I just put this slide up here. I mean, this is what's happening in our body with our triggers. I call them activators because they activate that body, the little almond, little tiny red thing in our brain there, the amygdala. It's like, oh my gosh, that is adding, and that is causing all of these things in the body to respond to an activator, the digestive system, your fight or flight, your racing heart rate, all these things. So it's just a little bit of science here, okay, which we have come so far with in our neuroscience life here in the last really our 10 years to 50. I mean, we have so much more information in the last 10 years. Okay, so let's talk about cognitive behavioral. This is super important. Now, if you haven't ever used cognitive behavioral, or if you don't know what your therapist is using, most likely it's something to do with this. This is the most widely used modality of therapy. And so this is why strongest research supported in treating anxiety disorders. It focuses on the here and now. Okay. It teaches you to view things differently, right? That belief system I was talking about. I'm jumping all over here. Positions the therapist and the client as a team. Okay. So this is not a little bit client focused, but it's not just like, here's what I'm telling you. The client and the therapist comes up with homework, working together, goals, weekly assignments, and exposures. Okay. The combination of the cognitive and behavioral results in clients becoming very self-sufficient. Now, if you take my 5-week anxiety course, or if you've done some CBT and you've got 5 or 6 sessions in, you should be very much self-sufficient almost at that point. Honestly, you are moving through training your brain yourself daily and weekly. And then the point is, wow, this doesn't interfere with my life as with my functioning. It doesn't interfere. And I use the word disturb. So remember, it can be discomfort. You can have it's discomforting, like, it's not comfortable. It's very uncomfortable. Let's use that word. So when you're uncomfortable, it makes us move. It makes us change something. It makes us go do something. It makes us, go to work. It makes us make a goal. It makes us, right, do something. And that gives us a little bit of dopamine and motivation. And so stress and anxiety can be good, right? Of course. And so when we adapt those and say, okay, this is what it is. It's uncomfortable for a minute, but it's not dangerous. So we have to tell our brain that the alarms that are going off, it's just making us uncomfortable, not dangerous, like we're going to die. Now there is some situations where we are, in a very serious situation, and we have to tell ourselves, well, we don't want to die right now. So self-talk. So that's what we have to do. We have to say, okay, where's our self-talk? I have this, you've seen this a million times, I'm sure. For me, I'm sorry, it's repetitive. This is how we start off with CBT, always. It's always a thought. And then we have this feeling, and then we have to decide the action, and then we have a thought again, and then we have feeling, and it keeps going. And that's why I make this circle keep going, so you understand that it keeps going. And the physical reaction is right here, right? Because if you have a feeling, you've got a physical reaction going on. And then you have to say, okay, here's the behavior. And this is where we have to be in the frontal lobes. And it's a whole other class to talk about why and when you're not in the frontal lobes. And what do you do then? That's a whole other situation. We've already done that in part 1. So you have to understand all those things. And now we are past that. We are in the frontal lobes, and we can stay there a lot better in part 2. And we're maintaining our self-talk, and we're maintaining a reward system, and we can reason, and we can, make sense of it, and we can have a solution to it and all those things. So that was in part one, but we are now maintaining this self-talk and wise mind. So wise mind, remember, is emotion and logic together. It's in the middle. So just remember, this is where we want to be at this point. And we can use the value of both, bringing the left and the right brain together, and it's a middle path, then we can stay focused in that frontal lobes, and we're using both, not just one side or the other. We're actually using both. So that's where we want to maintain. So just to throw this in, we're finding out way more about exposure, how the brain reacts to PTSD. For example, OCD is caused by inflammation. That is not new for me or for most people, but for me. So inflammation is the number one issue throughout the whole body. If you've ever heard my classes, if you've ever listened to some of the mind, body, soul connection, right? And as an integrated medicine provider for mental health, this is my training and my certification too, is like, so how do we reduce inflammation? Number one way, for example, just for a little icebreaker here, is like, okay, inflammation in the brain, what causes inflammation? Well, a lot of things. Our environment, foods. The number one thing that causes inflammation in the brain is not sleeping, because our brain shrinks 20% every single night if you get REM sleep. So it's things like that. So we want to sleep, for example, to reduce inflammation. You know, turmeric, magnesium, lots of things that reduce inflammation, not eating carbs, you know, all those things. So it's like, okay, well, if there's inflammation in the brain, there's inflammation in the body, then you're reacting. So every time you have a stimuli, a trigger, your body has a reaction, it's inflammation. So your brain goes, right? And that's what it does. And it makes you start having OCD thoughts, obsessive compulsive. Now, if you act on it, that's the behaviors, the compulsive part. Obsessive, then you compulse. Well, your body's going to be inflamed in order for that to work and do that. Trauma causes inflammation. Yes. And yes, that almond, little red spot in the brain, it causes our crisis center to go into activation. Okay. And so that's what's going on. Just, mostly, partially, maybe a lot for some people. Okay. So let's talk about exposure. So if anybody wants to chat about or comment, and if you chat, it's all anonymously. I will be checking the chat. You can definitely, have a discussion where you can talk about exposure. And if anyone's had done an exposure for a phobia, for example, or an obsessive compulsive act that you have going on, and just say, hey, yep, I've done this. This is my exposure, and this is what's happened. Or anyone that wants to share that, because it's really helpful. There's all kinds of exposures, and maybe a lot of people have no idea what an exposure is, and they've never done in therapy, or they haven't done therapy, right? Most of my clients have never done an exposure, and I do constant imagery work, and because I'm a trauma-focused therapist, I'm certified in anxiety and OCD disorders. I'm training EMDR, several certifications there. And so the CBT stuff, of course, goes along with that. But EMDR and trauma focus, we do a lot of, besides just prolonged exposure, We do a lot of imagery where we're facing a memory of a traumatic event or a disturbance, we call it. So we take a disturbance and we go through, and you might have a phobia because of that disturbance, right? So we have developed quite a bit of phobias. I wonder, do you wonder how that's, been in the last couple of years? Have we developed more phobias? Have we created a lot of safety behaviors? In case you've missed week one or part one or week, in the anxiety program, but safety behaviors sound great, but they are avoidances. Okay. So when I say safety behaviors, you will understand those as I go along. But so what we do is, in order to develop a phobia, you have to avoid the fear. So that is actually a phobia. So, yes. So the thing is about consistent overreacting in the brain. Okay. So let's talk about trauma a little bit with these. So you have every single one of these is consistent overreaction. Okay. In the brain. Then it's overreaction in the body, which causes inflammation everywhere. And so you overreact. And guess what? In order to desensitize, that's when we do an exposure. Okay. So we can use them on all of the on all of the anxiety disorders. So exposures, you have to be willing. Sometimes I kind of talk someone into, hey, what about this? What if we face something that you're really, really scared of, that you have a fear about, and try doing it again? And they're like, no, this is serving me. I really like my anxiety, and I really like not sleeping, and I really like not going to school, and I really like not talking to anyone, and I really like not speaking up in a meeting, and I really like not ever presenting. They're not saying that. So what exposure does is it changes the brain, scientifically, but trauma changes the brain. So repetitive PTSD, do you know what it looks like in the brain? This is new. This is, somewhat new, scientifically, neuroscience. It looks like a TBI, which is a traumatic brain injury. Ongoing PTSD now shows up the same way in some brains as a traumatic brain injury, like you've been in a car accident or had a concussion playing football. PTSD is doing that to the brain. So can we, if it changes the brain, can we not change it back? And the answer is yes. So repeated exposure practice, it has to happen with exposure. So like I said, I kind of jumped the gun on those safety behaviors. When I say safety behaviors, you don't know what I'm talking about. These are some of the safety behaviors, for example, listed here on the PowerPoint. So you're avoiding eye contact, you're sitting next to an exit, you're always taking your cell phone. I talked about that yesterday with my anxiety group. We all take our cell phones everywhere. But do you leave your cell phone in a different room? Or can you go somewhere without it? It's like, well, why would I need to? I don't know. Let me check in here. Yeah, so let's talk about that later. Someone just said, how do we get over which is a phobia, bugs, especially spiders. So that's an example of a pretty easy phobia, right? Not easy, but pretty simple example of like, oh, I'm scared of spiders. And okay, well, is it impairing your life? Are you I said this today or yesterday, is like, if you're spraying your house every single day, every single night, so you can sleep, with bug spray, we've got a problem, right? Just depends on how much it's really affecting you. But you can do an exposure on that. It's fantastic to do an exposure for spiders, right? So yeah, in case you have a sight of something like a spider, like a snake, I can't even say the word, some of those things. because people have severe phobias around it, and they actually do go into a panic attack but it's, by the way, I'm not going to call it panic, because if it's actually got an activator, which is the spider, it's actually an anxiety attack. It's not a panic attack, but they both do the same thing on the body, just so you know. Okay, so the formula is prolonged. It's repetitive. You're focusing on the feeling. Don't even just, yes, it's the anxiety, but it's automatically, we have to focus on what is happening. And if you've seen my other lots of emotional, I'm an emotional focused therapist, EFT with Sue Johnson for couples. So I do a lot of feeling, a lot of, but what's going on? So this is my emotional chart that I always have with me, but what's going on? You're focusing on what's going on and where it is in the body, what feeling it is. So if you're raw and overwhelmed and despair and discouraged and inadequate, and you feel raw and, really vulnerable, whatever it is, right? Because of the anxiety, whichever one is causing this to go into action. And then you have to reduce safety behaviors, not just, you can eliminate them eventually 100%, but first we have to just start reducing them. Okay, so let me look at this for a second, real quick. Yes. Do most people have social anxiety fears or fears of the things, objects? Yes. So fears of the fears. That's my Charlie Brown scenario, right? Charlie Brown has anxiety about anxiety. We have the actual phobia is having a panic attack about the panic attack, right? So you're having a phobia about having a panic attack in front of people or something like that. So things, object, yes. There's things and objects, but the social anxieties are honestly the word trapped. What's going on is you feel trapped in a social situation. That's it. In a group, at a party, in a meeting, giving a PowerPoint, right? So we're going to talk about those kind of things. So let me get to a couple more here and see if it will clear up some stuff. So here's some tips. Follow the rules. Unify your cognitive and behavioral forces. That's kind of hard to explain, but be prepared for some discomfort. Remember, it's not comfortable, but you have to stay with it because you have to repeat it. This is why it's called prolonged exposure. Okay. And we're going to teach you all about that in the next half hour. Okay. So the other part that you want to write down right now is pick one. Pick one fear that's maybe a 5 and under out of 10. 10 being like you're going to die if you run into a spider. So that is an external exposure. But what is your internal? Well, I have a complete anxiety attack. My body symptoms are this, this, and this. Okay. So you kind of start feeling out what is external and internal. So if it's all internal and you never saw a spider, but the thought of seeing a spider is going to freak you out. I'm sorry if I keep on bringing up the word spider, whoever's, going to have a panic attack right now, just plug your ears. So that's the thing, is if just the thought of something, but you actually didn't have the external, then that means it was all internal. And we sometimes with the EMDR, we float back to when it is that this started. That's really important in this kind of process too. If you really want to go back to the trauma of where it started. And sometimes we'll never find that out, but there's something connected to it. For example, I know why I don't like black widows. I can look at them and I can see them and I can kill them out in my yard, but I know exactly why I don't like black widows. It was from a childhood thing. Because I just was scared and I was alone and it was dark and it was in this like a cellar looking stairway thing. And there was black widows that I saw. And the first time I saw a black widow, I was like, that is to me, it's just a very ugly spider. Any other spider on the planet, I don't have a problem with. I can just go squish it, but I'm like, yeah, no big deal. But black widows, and it's not just because they're poisonous or I didn't get bit. It was just the incident of being alone and being a small child. You see where that was connected? Has nothing to do with the black widow. So it's uncomfortable when you fly over a city, appear at the movie, and always have a difficult with heights watching. Yes, yeah, that's a little bit of exposure. As we go along here, let's go back to that, and I'll go back to this this other child and I think it's more of just a cool story of like she's made strides. Okay, one of somebody's child. So super hard to face fears, but it's no way to live in fear body, in fear mode, in fear paranoid. Okay, so this is getting started. Okay, for example, like I said, write down something. Okay, so we're going to start with which trigger interferes with your life the most. And in a second, I'm going to actually teach you how to do a ladder. Okay, so just hold on. She's going to write, you're just brainstorming. And hopefully everyone always has a piece of paper. I'm a learner. I'm not an educator. Because the thing is when I learn, I have to write things down. And so I hope that you write things down because I go really fast. If y'all don't know that. So there's lots of material. And so, but that's where you get this. And there's a video that you can watch later. So write down some things that interfere with your life, that really interferes with your life. Okay. If it's like a 3 out of 10 and interferes once in a while, great. Put it down. And that's where we're going to do the ladder later in a minute. Which one do I predict would improve my life the most if my anxiety was reduced, right? So which part of these categories, say you have 3 on your paper of some fears that really interfere with your life. Which one would you want to reduce your anxiety with the most? And then does one stand out as being doable? We want to start with doable. If we've never done exposure before, we've never done imagery, we've never done a physical, exposure, then we want to definitely work with the therapist on some of these for sure. This is not just on your own, okay? But this is an idea of what you can take to your therapist. I have a phobia. I was sitting with a client and she didn't realize that what we were talking about was a phobia. And she's like, oh my gosh, that's a phobia. Yes. We have phobias all over inside of us that we are afraid of rejection. And we have a phobia about rejection. So what does that do in your life? You hustle for approval. And it's exhausting. When you're hustling for approval and you have an insecure attachment, whether it's anxious or avoidant, you're going to be hustling for approval. And it's exhausting. So if you have a phobia about someone leaving you out, is that a social anxiety or is that something else? A social anxiety or something else? It's something else. It's not. So then you just don't go to the party because you feel like you're going to be left out. Do you see how much deeper this is? So you build your confidence by doing the doable ones. And so you don't get overwhelmed, but bear with me for a second. Trust me, we're going to get to it. Okay. So now you kind of are thinking about, okay, here's some things. Here's a little list of like some triggers that I know I have, or activators, I call them, right? To activate my body. When I get left out, I feel activated and I shame myself. And then I have an anxious attachment. Yeah. So you go into social anxieties or separation anxieties. So common exposures are some examples of this. That's what we're just going to talk about some examples. So you get this and understand a little bit. And like I said, then we can say, hey, let's do some CBT, let's do some exposure therapy to really get somewhere. For example, let's do the physiological body. So when you're panicking and you're a hyperventilating person, or you get lightheaded, okay? So what we do, for example, in a therapy session is we put so I'm down here in this green section for panic. We chair spin, we breathe through a straw. So we get a straw. I'm not going to demonstrate it because you don't want me hyperventilating, but you get a straw, and I actually did this in my training, and we actually used it. I did it for 1 minute, right? We all did it. And it's a long minute, but you breathe really fast into a straw, out, in, out, in, out with a straw. Same thing with putting your head down between your legs and then sitting up quickly and down and up and down. So you get lightheaded. So why in the world would we want to bring this on to ourselves? Some of these, if you can see the screen, go through them a little bit and tell me in the chat, why in the world would we want to produce this in a different setting? Why would we want to induce our panic, our anxiety of, asking a question in class? Why would we want to get out of our perfectionism? So someone says, so we can understand our body's reaction to know how to get out of it. So you can show yourself that you will survive. Go one step further. So you can tell yourself you did something hard and you hyperventilate and you didn't die. That's what you have to tell your brain. So the point of exposure, when you're not escalated, is to train your brain to desensitize the fear. So you are in a safe environment. You're doing it there's a lot of different ways to do it, right? Something that you can control and it's happening. Yes. And you're choosing it. And so you can tell your brain over and over and over again, you did something hard and it was something you really didn't like to do, but you didn't die. So it's that challenge of the brain, and it's rewiring, telling the story that you can hyperventilate for 3 minutes and come back to baseline and get back to a 0 or maybe a 2 out of 10. See what I'm saying? So SUDs are really important. They're learning how to go 0 to 10, 10, and then back to 5, and then go back to 2. So this is an example of kind of like a ladder over here, this triangle. So the presenting a topic for a presentation, then observing others present causes someone to have anxiety. Practicing alone, anxiety. Recording it, practicing with a family member. Now you're practicing with 2 to 3 friends. And then the final, a 10 out of 10 is actually giving the presentation class. Yeah, that used to be me for sure in undergrad or grad school. And now I've taught hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of classes and hundreds of people, and done hundreds and hundreds of presentations. So the more you do it, the more it is not, it desensitizes it. So here's your little fear ladder. No, so I don't have a ladder, but think of a ladder, okay? So just like the pyramid or the triangle, right? So but I want you to go up with like 10 being the top of the ladder, being extremely fearful, okay? So you draw a ladder, you put the same things that, like, okay, if I just did a presentation by myself in front of the mirror, if I just did it, like the steps that was on the other slide, right? So it's like, okay, this is moderate fear, right? Yeah. And then here's the extreme fear. And it's just 1 to 10. 10 is always in SUDS, in the way I do everything, and most in EMDR, 10 is the highest extreme disturbance. When someone's having a full-blown panic or anxiety attack and they have to leave the classroom and throw up, that to me is an 11 out of 10, because we have to get to that point where we physiologically do throw up. That's an 11. So that's kind of how you can kind of see how that works, right? So these are examples, okay? Don't look at the spider if you have spider phobias. So real life exposure, imagery, I do tons of imagery. I do imagery like 95% of the time, because I can't go out in the field and take someone out driving or things that they're scared of or phobias of germs, you know. And so in my training, of course, the presenter actually, she goes out with the client in real life and actually does a real life exposure like every day, all the time. I mean, the stuff that she was talking about, I was like, wow. So Blomquist, of course, we don't do that. We don't have that luxury of really working deeply with someone 2 or 3 times a week with a severe phobia. So that's long-term care. So bringing your sensations out of play and discomfort, that was the straw, physical sensations. So you're going to actually bring your body to that level that lead to harmful events, right? So I'm going to bring myself to this, you know, actually touching germs, literally, and then bringing your body up to that level. So that's a real life exposure plus a body discomfort, right? But the thing is all of these have a body discomfort, because I've watched people do an imagery with me and go through the fear in the imagery, and it happens just like they were doing it. And our brain actually reacts and fires the exact same way. So that's why imagery works, because our brain really thinks we're doing it. So how to maintain it. So now that you're practicing it, say that you're with a therapist, maybe you pick one thing, maybe you do this on your own, okay? If it's like a 5 and under, say you pick a doable one and you practice it. So you just face something that you haven't done for a while and that you want to do again. So you start doing it a little bit at a time in your head and imagery first. Don't just start doing it, but you know, you can. Some people it's kind of like cold turkey. You just like quit, right? And you start doing it. Either way, you have to keep working on it, but it's really best to slowly work up to it, right? So you're working up to the exposure, which is just seeing yourself doing a little bit, and you spend just a couple minutes doing that. Then you know, in a safe place, make sure someone's near you if you need, you know, some help to help you, you know, deregulate, but that's also a safety behavior. And then do it to a point where you can get on your own. Okay. So first, work on it. 2, love yourself. Show yourself mercy, show yourself, you know, kindness and practice. Forgive yourself, you know, things like that. So you can do a hand over heart. You make sure you're practicing kindness. Even though I'm struggling, I love myself, things like that. So for example, you know, that gives you some love yourself stuff. Okay. There's some apps that are fantastic that, you know, you can use here. Some things are free. Some things are like, if you want more, then, you know, you can pay for headspace. But Beautify, no, I just not, what's it called? Yeah, I'm trying to think of now. I don't know how to say that, but that was one of them that was a new one that I had used before. So accept the suffering, welcome it, wait for it to pass. That's the radical acceptance part of DBT and CBT. So you go through acceptance. I'm going to accept the suffering. I'm going to welcome it. And then I'm going to wait for it to pass. So that's the key. So if you can get to 4, you're doing really good. But think about it. If you've had pretty good 8, 9s, or 10s with just anxiety or panic, you know, you've done it already. you've already done this. And then you're like, okay, wait, oh, see, I can get through it. But if we don't radically accept that that you can get through it, then we're now fearing not getting through it. And so then we fear having the panic attack again, right? So we got to do self-talk. Now, remember my earlier slide about self-talk, positive self-talk. Okay, been here before. Like I was just saying, you know that the brain lies to me. I know the brain lies to me. It tells me I'm going to die, but I'm really not. And it's okay to feel this way. Danger versus discomfort. So you say, wow, what would this person do? How would that person react? I don't like comparison, but just think about that. So really, to me, when it says that, I want you to pick a mentor. How would this person present when like, you know, I looked up to my professors like crazy. I worked at a university for almost 7 years as I went through school. And then after I was in grad school, then I was an adjunct professor. And I was like, the first time I taught was very terrifying almost, right? So I thought, okay, how did these other professors get through it? How did they do it? So just think of something, a mentor that someone else, how would they get through discomfort? You know, everyone has discomfort. Oh, okay. Radical acceptance again. So say it out loud to someone so you can check if the facts are in or fear. Facts or fear. So that's always helpful. So if you need someone, you know, to check in with, make sure you have that person say, am I, you know, when I do this exposure, am I thinking straight? And so you just want to get kind of a little bit of reassurance, but you want to really go into the facts. That's the thinking errors class. So you want to make sure you're not jumping to conclusions, you're not overgeneralizing, you're not black and white thinking, you're not shoulding yourself. Those are all thinking errors. 8, it's just a thought. Let it pass, throw it out. It's not let it go. I don't do that very much, honestly. I don't love the statement. It's used a lot. Okay. I don't use it personally. I let it be. Let it pass. Let it sit with you. Let it be there. And then it's not going to disturb you as much if you're just going to allow it. That's mindfulness. That's a lot of non-judgment of allowing things to be. And let it pass, but let it go. Yeah, let it go. You see the difference? Maybe not. Try not to engage in the safety behaviors. So the biggest thing that I do, especially with couples that we're working on with their patterns, okay, is their urges. So your urge is going to be to use your safety behaviors to get you out of pain. That is a part of us. So we want to get out of our pain. So we use safety behaviors, which you've already written down some, hopefully, and say, oh, yeah, I do this, this, and this to keep me out of pain. So I have to avoid something because I fear it. So then you really try to not engage in your safety behaviors. So when you have that urge, you have to replace that urge. And I do a lot of, 10-minute distractions, and that's your tools week. All your 10-minute distractions is to get you out of that urge. Okay. Okay. You with me? Timer is a free, yes. Free meditation app. That's awesome. There's a whole bunch of meditation apps that are now really quite cool. And there's a lot of things to try out there. And that helps you stay engaged, right? But there is some exposure apps out there. Let's see. Safety behaviors 9. Build your I can do it resilience, right? What doesn't kill you it makes you stronger, right? It's not going to kill. A lot of it is like, okay, my brain's telling me I'm going to die, but it's really just discomfort. Okay, With me so far? I know this is fast. So let's do an example here of building your ladder. Now that you know how to maintain, let's just do a little exercise here. So for example, Jim has he avoids social events because he doesn't like gatherings, he doesn't like to present, he doesn't like to talk to people, but it's really causing some distress. Okay, so staying long enough in his anxiety to come down, ready to tackle his greater fear, Jim gives a speech at a large conference hosted by his employers because that's part of his job. So now he's having to like, hey, this is part of what I have to do. So how do I get over this, phobia? So we build a ladder. He's not, so see, he's a 6 out of 10. He doesn't even get to a 5 and under. There's nothing 5. It's all pretty escalated. So imagining he's attending a large gathering. Same thing with the other examples that I've given, right? 6, it's a 6 out of 10 if he just greets several coworkers. 7, meets 2 close friends for coffee. He's sweating just having a conversation with 2 close friends. That's quite, disturbing, right? 2 coworkers for lunch. That's a 7 out of 10. Eat at a crowded restaurant with 3 friends. Wow, we're getting up there, right? 9, attend a holiday office party. I missed mine because of traffic. It's so sad. See, that doesn't give me anxiety at all. Missing a party in traffic and sitting 45 minutes trying to get on the freeway does. So, give a presentation at a large conference is a 10 out of 10. So that's his fear level. So now, we're going to work on maybe a couple of those other ones, right? Because those are doable, because we don't have to work on the presentation yet. We just have to, him being in a meeting or him talking to friends. He sounds, by the way, a little highly sensitive, because anytime we've got this much going on this high, sensitivities to all 5 senses is a highly sensitive person. And you can look that up. She is an author. What's her last name? I'm not going to be able to tell you right now. I can see it, but I can't say it. But yes, we always look at these. I always look at how sensitive people are to other things, light, sound, people, energy to others. If it robs you of energy, then it's not just a social anxiety, it's a highly sensitive situation. Okay, that's a 2 different things. Okay. Anybody want to admit that you've done some EMDR in the chat and how this is looking? This is just one little slide on it, because prolonged exposure is what is CBT, or trauma-focused CBT, has very good 40 years of significant statistics and improvement, if not eliminating severe anxiety disorders. And so does EMDR. And I use a lot of them together, but really a lot of EMDR when I'm just doing simple imageries, right? So we do a lot of future templates, it's called. We do special place, we do container, we do spiral. They're all imageries. And I teach you those resources so you have those installed to help you along the way. So this is just a little bit about EMDR. It's, for trauma, the base is for PTSD for sure, and anxiety disorders, but the eye movement, desensitize and reprocess. So that's all you need to know. So we desensitize the brain literally, and then we have to reprocess it to a positive cognition. And in Thinking Errors Part 2, I talk about those negative cognitions, positive cognitions. What are they? You have to understand what your negative cognitions are tied to the anxiety. If I go to this party and no one talks to me, I am blank. What are you? What is your negative cognition story that you're telling yourself, that if you don't talk to anyone at the party, you are what? I'm worthless. I'm what? What's a negative cognition around a social anxiety. I am left out. I don't belong. That's always a good one. I don't belong. So then you have this, now you have a phobia about not belonging. Do you see what I'm saying? So now we've got this installed negative cognition because of the anxiety. So we have to reprocess that story. It's not just that you don't belong, it's I am okay is the positive cognition. So we reinstall and reprocess that. Such as a traumatic memory or an uncomfortable body situation, right? So we attend to that material, that memory and the uncomfortable part that's inside the body. The body's cells holds trauma. The cells hold trauma. So we're trying to eliminate the inflammation that's caused by those cells that have held the trauma. And you don't know how many times we can pinpoint trauma that's held in the body somewhere, right? And once we release that trauma and get out of the cells, that body doesn't hurt anymore, ache anymore, have a disease in that part of the body, seriously. So yeah, it's pretty serious stuff if you want to get into long-term care with EMDR. Okay. So let's review. So we have some time for questions, and I'm going to go over the resources and some books, okay? So repetitive exposures, and we have to really eliminate that safety behavior after you practice the exposure, because as soon as you bring back that safety behavior, guess what you've done? You've retrained the brain again, right? So we really want to get rid of those safety behaviors after we desensitize with exposures. So now we can set that phone or that pepper spray or that, thing over here and still, go to the store. So then you practice and then don't use your safety behaviors. Okay. Any other questions? Let's see. I missed something in the chat too. The science and the peer-reviewed articles journals about the magnesium turmeric. Oh, so let's do that. Okay, here's my list. Here's the partial, it's a very small list actually, but it's my basic list that I put everywhere in some of the workshops and in the anxiety program. So this is amino acids. Yeah, some SSRIs you can't take 5-HTP with. This is going to help you sleep. This GABA is going to help anxiety. 5-HTP helps all kinds of things because it's a serotonin. It's going to help serotonin. Serotonin is the root of OCD, sleep problems, weight problems, and I could go on and on. So 5-HTP is a natural neurotransmitter, as GABA is too. So we use GABA to treat anxiety. In kids, I treat anxiety. I treat autism, anxiety, ADHD, GABA. So get if you have a kiddo or if you have other issues with some of these, just do totally do a video. Let me go back. A video session with me, and we can just go over some of these. You can have a video with me in a session anytime, and with any of our therapists. But I don't think anyone else is certified in integrated medicine. But so here's some things, right? Just some things. Of course, vitamin D. This is what gives us serotonin. So we produce enough melatonin at night. If we're not getting this, you will not have enough melatonin. Then you won't sleep. Sleep's number one. Here's your magnesium. Turmeric is not even on here, but your number one thing for anti-inflammatory is magnesium. Look it up. Just read it yourself. And turmeric. Find out yourself. Now, glycosinate's the best kind of the most absorbent and the best on the stomach out of all the magnesiums. That's why I just call it. Yes, all sessions are free with Blomquist under your benefit, under your company. If you got connected with this somehow, you have free therapy. So yeah, so there's some things there. Omega-3, super, super, super important for inflammation because that's your brain fat. And I promise you're not eating enough fish to get that. And always check with your pharmacist and your doctor. Really, it's just your doctor. If you're on other medications, just check to see if you've got kidney, liver issues. These are all going to go through the kidney and liver unless you're taking them orally or injecting, with an IV. So you're going to go through your kidneys and through your liver with all these. But that's why I like oral as much as possible so it doesn't go through the gut. But I do have a gut workshop, mental health in the gut, that's already on YouTube. Okay. You can just call Blomquist. Just call Blomquist and say, hey, I want to play with Carol. And at first of the year, you're going to get in. So, and we can just do a Zoom from wherever. So these are some, this is these two right here, Purnell and Shapiro. Okay. Purnell is where I got extensively trained in attachment with EMDR. I use this book every day. This is for you guys. This is tapping in. You can use this every day. This is my #1 to rewire the brain. And she also has Rewiring the Addicted Brain with the EMDR. So those are 2 books that she has. Extensive. This is so cool. Okay. And then my other one is Getting Past Your Past. That's by Shapiro, the founder. There's 2 founder of EMDR. You buy that. That is for you, the client, of self-help techniques for EMDR. That teaches you long life ways to get rid of your disturbances on your own. 2 coolest books ever. And then read Body Keeps the Score. Skip over some really traumatic stories in there if you need to. Don't read the whole thing. But the Body Keeps the Score is definitely worth it. Yes. So if you want to learn about the gut, which is the most important thing next to sleep, it's already on YouTube. It's called Mental Health in the Gut or Gut and Mental Health, one or the other. It's called that. But if you put in gut in the search bar in our videos on our YouTube channel, you'll find it. Okay. So anything else?